And we're on. Welcome back to the Lore and Valor podcast. I'm your host, Justin Watson. My guests today are Kacey Ezell, Air Force Academy graduate, currently serving Air Force helicopter pilot, and author of science fiction and fantasy, and Joelle Presby, Annapolis graduate, former Naval Nuclear Power Officer, if I got your MOS right, Joelle, and also author of science fiction and fantasy. So thanks for joining me today, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And today we're here to talk about Arcane Season 1. We went through a whole military decision-making process, deciding what we were going to talk about, and this is what we settled on. So
this is what your taxpayer dollars pay for, folks.
Yeah, no, we applied all that training we received at our various service academies to deciding what streaming show we were going to bullshit about on the internet.
There were PowerPoint slides and the nuke did not provide them. That's amazing.
There were like two PowerPoint slides, and they didn't even really show up all that well. So, so anyway, I drove I helped drive the train on this one a little bit because Arcane is one of the things I've seen this year that really, like a lot of people, it took me by surprise, and I really kind of fell in love with it. Episode 1 was, I don't want to say one of the worst, but not, it was intriguing, but it's not, by far not the best episode of the series. Just a brief recap. You come into it and it looks like we're at the end of a failed revolution, is what we're looking at, with uniformed troops seeming to crack down on ragtag insurgents is what it looks like to me. Maybe that's my, maybe I cottoned onto that because that's my background, is fighting insurgencies. So that even in the fantastical setting, that coded to me automatically as that's what I'm looking at. You quickly, from there, you have a time jump and you go into a heist scenario where we have a gang of adolescents breaking into what looks like an upper scale mansion in a nicer part of this fantastical city of Piltover that goes horribly wrong. And you end up with the main characters, the two sisters, Powder and Violet, having to run from the police back to the I think it's called Zon, the lower socioeconomic part of the city, the slums, so to speak. And then from there, the rest of the episode plays out as to all the various cascading consequences of the failed revolution that we get in prologue, and then the heist that actually ends up detonating the mansion they're trying to rob from, because there are techno-magical items there that amateurs really need not be screwing around with that end up going off. So from there, we end up seeing the city's underworld a lot, and then we end up seeing how the law enforcement of this universe plays in to the undercity, so to speak, of this world. And I found all those interchanges very fascinating. But I'm gonna pause here and stop talking for a minute. Kacey, you were the one we had to convince. So because you tried to watch this once and bounced off of it. So I'm going to put you on the spot and let you go first and talk a little bit about your impressions this time.
Well, I actually enjoyed it. I did. I will say that. And it was kind of funny because I was like, okay, I have to watch this show so I can do this podcast, and I'm going to take notes. So like, I got my pretty little notebook and my like colored pens so that I can could make notes. And I actually, overall, I really enjoyed it. But there was a couple of things that like stood out to me, and you mentioned this in your recap, that like the opening scene looks like a failed insurgency to you. And I agree, but that I noticed something about that opening scene too. And I thought it was, from a storytelling perspective, a interesting hook, sort of. The title of the episode, which you really don't see very much of the title of the episode. It's not like it flashes up or anything. It's just, there on Netflix. But the title of the episode is Welcome to the Playground, which is, a pretty good title for like, hey, this is the first episode in this journey that you're about to take. But it it struck me that it's kind of cool that it's like, welcome to the playground. And then the very first shot that you see is very much not a playground. And yet you have a voiceover, the little girl singing, you know what I mean? And so that juxtaposition right away was like, it twigged in my writer brain, like, oh, that's cool. You know, like that's something that piqued my interest and made me want to figure out more about what was going on. Even though the mom in me was like,
what are these kids doing here?
Well, yeah, I might, yeah. What the F are these, you know, get these effing kids out of there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and as an American, you know, as again, somebody who's been to Iraq and Afghanistan, it's like, keep your kids off the battlefield, please.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, if you can, like, I understand if they get
right,
caught
if you
up.
can. But then, you know, with recent events in Ukraine and you know, all of that stuff going on. Yeah. I mean, that's what it made me think. I was like, shit, that sucks. You know, like just there's no two ways about it. That really sucks.
Yes.
So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that was dark, and I'm sorry to bring us down, but
no. This is, for it being, you know, this is adult animation for sure, which does not mean it's pornographic. But it deals with some very dark, very mature themes. Yeah. Not
a kid's show. I was explaining that to my youngest when she was asking me about, you know, what I was watching and stuff. So, so do you want me to just like go through my impressions overall, or, you know, how much do you want me to talk before I really?
Well, you've kind of done an opening salvo. Joelle, why don't you jump in? What were your initial impressions?
I was wondering if anyone else noticed. I did not take it at the beginning as insurgency. I thought a bomb had gone off with all the smoke around and everything. Mm-hmm. And I was not surprised to find the children discover that their mother had died, because I have watched Disney for decades. And I know the mom does not survive for the story.
Yeah.
This is not a Pixar film, therefore there is no mommy.
Right.
I'm curious to learn why, because I did some Googling after I watched the episode. And I'm horrible at remembering names, even if they're my characters. So Powder and Vi are being cared for by Vander. I thought in the episode that Vander was their dad. But
I was curious about that too.
Yeah, he was. They don't.
I don't know why he cares for them.
Yeah. I don't think it's spoilers to say that, like, the implication is, I don't think they come out and explicitly say this. Maybe they do. Because I think I'm the only one who's watched all the way through to the end at this point. You guys are watching through episode by episode. I don't think they come out and say exactly what Vander's relationship was to their parents, just that he's someone who is close enough to their parents to feel responsibility for them. And you just have to go with it from there. Like, I think is the explanation.
Right. I definitely got that they knew him because he picked them up and they like curled into him, which you know, they're only going to do if you're familiar, at least.
Yeah. There's only a few people who usually fit that mold,
right?
Other than your folks. So you just understand that he raises them from that point forward, and it doesn't give you a lot of detail other than that, which I think by the end of the show you're pretty okay with. I don't think that becomes like a. I mean, you might be like, no, really, this bothered me throughout the whole thing.
By the end of the episode, I thought, okay, this guy is just a really good guy. He looks out for people in need, but he's also maybe not that experienced raising people, and maybe has come to the raising people thing late, because there are worse things he didn't really intend to, but he's decided not to tell them about it. And let them kind of trust that they'll listen to him and do what he says instead of understanding the reasons, even as they're teenagers.
Yeah.
So I got this is interesting too, because I thought about that too. I got the impression that that there's like a curious mix of worldliness and naivete that he has passed on to them as he's raising them. Because on the one hand, it's like, okay, he raised them to be thieves and con artists because that's the life he knows. You know,
if they got in a fight, did they win? That's important.
Right. If they got in a fight, did they win? They know how to, like, he's taught them how to defend themselves. But at the same time, he's trying to protect them and keep them innocent. And so therefore hasn't told them about, you know, oh, this might be spoilery. Can we be spoilery?
Yeah, pause. For the viewer's sake, like talking about TV and a show that's been on the air for a while, if you have not seen Arcane episode 1, pause this and go watch it, because we're gonna spoil the hell out of the episode. It's kind of hard not to pick it apart without talking about everything that actually happens, and there are definitely some spoilery stuff. I'm gonna try to refrain from late season spoilers when I'm talking, but there will be spoilers for this episode for sure.
Okay, good. So, obligatory spoiler pause observed. He doesn't tell them that essentially he has a deal with the enforcers that, like, we'll stay out of your town, you stay out of ours, you know. And like Joelle said, like, that's pretty important information. You know, he tells them to stay out of the town, but he doesn't tell them why. And he's obviously very inexperienced at raising teenagers. Because, you know, speaking as someone who has raised at least one teenager, that is an absolute recipe to get them to do the thing that you told them not to do, is to say, don't do this, end of story. You know, like, I'm not going to explain myself.
Full disclosure, my oldest is only 4, so I have more experience raising teenagers. However, I have been a division officer. And in the Navy, the average age of the enlisted person is 18, which means you get a lot of 17-year-olds.
Yeah.
Are mature, but not all of them.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a basic leadership principle, regardless of your relationship to said teenager. If you tell them to do something and you don't give them an explanation that they're satisfied with, they're going to go and do the thing.
The explanation doesn't have to be the real explanation. It just has to be one that people can accept.
Right. Well, yeah, absolutely.
Well, and that's like, I think you're both correct about his error. I will say I don't think that's a writing mistake, though. I think it's believable in the character.
Yeah.
You know, and furthermore, I find that, so just to keep us in position where we are in the show. So we have the opening sequence we talked about a lot. We have the robbery that we're talking about and the fallout from it. And like you said, you do learn as they're dealing with the fallout from this robbery in the richest part of town that, oh crap, that was a very prominent family that owned that building you blew up. And Vander has this deal cut with law enforcement. I can understand why Vander doesn't want his adopted daughters to think he's a stooge. And he's not a stooge, but if it were common knowledge that he was cutting a deal with the cops, it probably undermines his position. He probably doesn't want his kids, effectively, for this point, to look at him that way, but he knows it's necessary. So I think it's a great conflict for Vander that he's stuck in between, this is how I keep us more or less free, and I keep the city from erupting into war. If there were any lesser stakes than this, there's no way I'd probably cut this deal, but this is what I have to do, and I don't think they would understand if I tell them. Still a mistake on his part, because like you said, if you don't give your kids or your subordinates, Joelle, to your point, if you don't give them an adequate reason and just keep saying, because I said so, and the frustration mounts, eventually they're going to get mutinous. And that's where we're at. Go ahead, Joelle.
Side note, I'm hoping that this is a hook for later, either later in the season or in future seasons. And I'm interested in Kacey's take on it. So they see an airship distant. We don't get a close up of it. We don't get the details. And Powder says, I want to fly on one of those one day. And Milo says, I want to blow one up. And so
I'm going to shoot one down.
Shoot one down. Are they going to be on rival airships having a battle someday, the two of them? Because I mean, I didn't play the I didn't play the origin game that led to this, but
Me neither.
I'm generally aware that Powder and Vi are not bosom buddy sisters in the game. And so I'm interested to see if we have that split and then that conflict happen in this season, or if that comes later, or how it all works. I mean, it could be in Reinvention and it might not go there, but
yeah.
I will say the airships play into it. They're not. You're not going to get Napoleonic airship battles yet. Like, at least not in season 1. I'll go ahead and lower your expectations a little bit there. So, but there is some cool action on airships. I will say.
And one of the things on the counter in the apartment/laboratory that they rob is a really giant flange. A tube with sides to rivet onto something. And we haven't seen anything that goes with, but there were enough technical details that even though they've got magic rocks that blow up, they also have a lot of tech that actually fits together. So I'm curious what kind of tubing they've got that needs that big of flange size. Because that's pretty heavy to be used on an airship. Are there steam ducts that provide power in some way? Under the United States Naval Academy, there is a bunch of old steam piping that's about that size, and midshipmen are absolutely not allowed to be traveling under there ever. So of course I've never been there, and that's why I don't know what it looks like. But it kind of the tech level of this place seems, with the addition of the magic rocks, a little bit steam power. So I'm going to be curious to see if in background we get more of that kind of stuff.
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I noticed that during the escape, the kids jump down what looks like a sewer pipe or a garbage pipe, right? So, when you it's about that same size. So clearly, piping is a thing that is somewhat ubiquitous in this world. And I got to be honest, I love this aesthetic, right? I love steampunk stuff anyway, but specifically this show, my second overall impression of it is just that it's beautiful. It is the art style I thought was gorgeous. But even I mean, yes, let's talk about the art style, but let's talk about that in a minute. But even within the art style, that kind of like Art Nouveau aesthetic that you see throughout the fancy town. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names.
Piltover.
Yeah, throughout Piltover is so beautiful, and I absolutely love it. And I absolutely loved that they carried that over into like a dark nouveau aesthetic once they went down into the slum area.
Mirror version of it.
Yeah, totally. I thought that was really, really well done, really beautiful. And I think it's really cool. One of the things that I do love about the steampunk aesthetic overall is that the design of the thing is as important, if not more important, I would say in good steampunk, the design is as important, but not more important than the function of the thing. And those pieces of technology and those pieces of mechanical, whatever they were, that they found in that workshop, that had all these cool workings and whatnot. Even the magic rocks, they were beautiful as well. Yeah. I dug that. I thought that really kind of like added to the world building and the feel and the like immersion of watching the show.
I agree completely, and I'd add too that I think I can't remember the name. I think it's Studio Mir. I think it's a French animation studio that did this, and apparently it's they paid top dollar for the animation they got, and it shows. One of the things, I agree with everything you said about aesthetics, and furthermore, one of the things that impressed me the most is the feeling of weight and the physics engine. Not like like I'm not a STEM guy, but the intuitive feel of when they're running from the enforcers and they're sliding down something and their feet impact on a pipe, or they jump and you can feel the impact in their joint, or the fights when even though they take more damage than kids their age might be able to take, maybe if you're being if you're worried about realism, which I'm not, but the feel of a punch impacting a face and how it's animated, it all feels more kinetic and more real than, and I'm going to take a pot shot at my beloved Marvel Cinematic Universe, it feels more real than the CGI shitfests you get at the end of most live action movies that are action adventure. This feels like it has more impact. And subconsciously, as writers, like we don't, we're all authors of short stories and novels, but I really appreciate about this medium that they understand it's so important to have your physics feel real because it creates the subconscious assumption of stakes. It's like if it feels like an impact, people can get hurt. Even if plot-wise and story-wise, this person is not going to die right here. It still helps you feel like there are stakes here because this is a real universe with real humans who, if they fall far enough or take a hard enough hit, will be incapacitated or killed. So I think that's just such brilliant work on the animator's part, and I really appreciated that right off the bat.
And story-wise, because they've got 4 people there, all the audience kind of knows we could easily lose one.
Yeah.
Or more.
And the audience that knows about the backstory of the 2 sisters, is this the point where they break? Is this, does Powder leave Vi behind to die? What happens?
Yeah, my understanding of the game is that hardly any of this plays into it. Like that the characters exist, and you're right, Joelle, there is a break between Powder and Vi, but that like the richness of backstory we get in this series is not reflected in the game at all. From what I understand, I've never played it. But people who have told me like, oh yeah, no, they wrote this. Yes, there are characters from the game and settings from the game and a lot of Easter eggs from the game in the series, but almost all of this feels like it's whole cloth for the series, and it's not even hinted at in the game. So my understanding is it's a battle arena. It's like a tactics game, but steampunky. It's not an RPG or anything with a story heavy focus. It's, pick 4 characters from a faction and go do turn-based battle with them, which nothing wrong with that. But it's not exactly what when I play video games.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, like this game, this show, sorry, really caught me up. So we've talked about the animation, we've talked about the story. I really love the police characters, Grayson and Marcus, and their arrival. One of my personal, not to get political because it's not really what I'm getting at, but one of my philosophies is there is no system so perfect that you're not going to have workarounds. And that's from my experience in the Army. That it's like, you have this big, massive bureaucracy, and by the time it gets down to you from on high, it's probably pretty dysfunctional. So you're going to have to figure out how to make it work anyway within the system. And I love that Grayson, the female cop, who's voiced by the same actress from The Expanse, who's the UN intelligence chief, whose name I can't remember.
I was half expecting her to torture somebody.
Yeah, exactly. But I love the relationship
for your voice.
Yeah, I love the professionalism between the two, and that normally this is the kind of problem they would solve together, but because of Vonder's personal stake, it's now insoluble, and we're left with that of this is going to erupt if he can't figure out a way out of it.
And maybe if he were less ethical, he would throw somebody
else,
pick a volunteer or volunteer someone. You're now going to suffer for this,
right?
Yeah. I kind of love his. He's like a chaotic good version of Fagin from Oliver Twist. That he's like the runner of street orphan thieves, only he actually does care about them and is trying to do good in his own, realistic way.
And story-wise, we've got the 2 things going on where if Xander would just sacrifice somebody, it sure looks like it would be better for everyone in Undercity. But we've got the evil, probably archvillain, who randomly decides to take Deckard, his his kid thug and use him as an experiment lab rat when he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Tiny turn for the life.
So Silco, that character, is one of the overarching antagonists of the show. What were y'all's first impressions of him as a character? Out of curiosity.
He signals as a villain, right? He does everything but twist the mustache. Yeah, like first frame he's in, it's like, oh cool, it's the bad guy, you know, like so that was, you know, and again, part of that I think is the visual medium, right? He's drawn with very angular lines, and the one glowing eye, you know, that's usually a pretty good giveaway. That's right. At first, so the question that I am left with is, why did he have his Decker, the kid? Why did he have the kid following Vander's kids? He said, because his first line is, I told you just to follow them. And now you got distracted, and now Vander's asking questions. Okay. So but he didn't know that they were the ones who were responsible for blowing up the building in Piltover, which meant that he didn't know that they were in on that heist, which meant that he didn't set them up on that heist. At this point, I'm going to go on the record and say, I am convinced that someone set them up on that heist, that entire heist was a setup. Don't confirm or deny. I want to find out.
I am also gonna make a guess. My guess is that he wanted something, or wanted to mess with the rich people who own that apartment/laboratory, and so he sent the person into the place with Little Man. And he didn't know he was going to get the kids to go. He thought he would get someone like Xander.
Vander.
And
it's a V. I think, yeah.
Vander. I've been reading somebody else's thing where it was a Z. Okay. So
I actually think it's Vander. I've been pronouncing it wrong too. I think it's Vander, not Vander. I'm just doing my half-remembered German pronunciation of things. So, but go ahead.
If we get people making comments on the show, they can be like, we get it wrong again. Okay, so anyway, I think he planted the information and intentionally had his person, or maybe even himself, overpay and provide all these details because he maybe knows about the relationship with the Overcity and the Undercity, and he wants to break it. He did not know about the explosion because even he, in his evil geniusness, did not think that anybody would open that case and break one of the magic glowy rocks because they're really dangerous. And why would anyone do that if they had any idea what a magic glowy rock was? And why would they pick them up if they didn't know? Because he did not factor in children.
I don't know, because he had him. He said, "I told you to follow them," right? Which to me reads as if he specifically said, "Follow these kids," not stand here and wait for someone to come back from Piltover, whoever they may be. So I'm wondering if he wasn't trying to just get anything on Vander because there's some enmity there.
Or he wanted to collect info because he wanted them to be his next lab rats.
Or that, yeah. He's trying to use trying to get at Vander through the girls. That to me sounds more plausible than that he would send them after this score and not know about the explosive potential of the biggest piece of the score. Mm-hmm. Story-wise. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Though the Guardians make the statement that there'd be a lot of stuff in that laboratory and nobody would really know what, as if the people working there are constantly designing new weapons and technology, and they're
without saying what
kind.
Without saying what it is, you do get to find out a lot more about the folks who work in that laboratory and what they're up to. So I'm not going to say what it is, but you do get, that is something we explore. So
that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Can we, if we have time, can we talk a little bit about the fight sequence at the beginning of the show too? Back when the kids are escaping from Piltover and they run into Decker and and his thugs I again, from a story writing perspective, this is something that I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I'm totally going to write that down. So, because I'm totally going to use this at some point. With the character of Vi, I thought it was really interesting, her whole progression through that fight sequence, because here you have her at the beginning kind of getting her ass kicked, right? Like that beautiful slow motion shot of fist impacting face and like blood going out. Yeah, that's her face, right? And she's an adolescent girl fighting with a boy who is physically larger than she is in that scene, and she is getting the shit kicked out of her. And you see her being picked up and body slammed, and you see her little sister like watching and being really scared, and that's part of the reason that Powder runs away, and eventually you see Vi kind of like come online and with the help of her crew start kicking more ass and everything, and that's cool. But she's never like the dominant fighter in that whole like milieu until the very, very end, when Decker or whoever it is pulls out his knife and she looks at him and she says, "Do you want to see how this ends?" And it scares the shit out of him simply by like her demeanor. And so I thought that was really interesting, because what that says about the character is that she's scary, but she's scary because she can take a punch, and she's not intimidated by a blade. So what does that mean? Does that mean she's taken a life with a blade before, and she's, therefore blank about it? I don't know. That I'm probably what's the word? Projecting a little bit, like imagining maybe some stuff. But I thought that was really, really skillful character development just in that one sequence. And I'm looking forward to finding out more about her because of that.
I think I agree with you. It's a great moment in the show. And furthermore, the fact that these are adolescents dealing with adolescents, and just, in D&D terms, her charisma and her intimidate score are through the roof, and she used it properly. That it's just like that kid.
But why does a teenage girl have that kind of intimidation stat? You know what I mean? What has she been through to get her there? Because that doesn't come out of nowhere.
No, it doesn't. And that kid probably doesn't like her, even though she's young and impulsive, her understanding that this kid probably really doesn't want to either get killed or kill anyone, even though he's pulling out a blade because he was embarrassed. So her correct reading of that is interesting too. Another thing, coming off the fight, you have Powder gets chased off by one of the other thugs.
She's running with a rucksack. And somehow she gets far enough ahead that he's around the corner. And I don't know how your academy experiences are, but only a very few times at the Naval Academy do you run with things, because not everybody has to be a Marine. But my experience was, there is no way I'd be able to put a block between myself and someone who doesn't have a sack. I'm a foot shorter than them, and so my legs are shorter. So that was scared to run that fast.
Yeah, absolutely. That was pure adrenaline to be able to do that.
And adrenaline can reduce your 100-meter dash by a second or two. Yeah. That's true. So she ends up having to ditch their ill-gotten gains, most of them anyway, as we find out later. And
he doesn't have a rucksack.
Yeah. Well, and I found that setup for me. So very often I get annoyed with a story when it manufactures false tension with misunderstanding, because the misunderstanding is because people are stupid. It's not a situation where two people have a misunderstanding and it's really realistic, and you could see yourself in either person's shoes seeing it the way they see it.
Yeah.
So you end up with tension because Powder has to ditch the the goods, the magic glowy rocks,
Right.
and they stole, and the rest
one
of
in
the
her
crew is,
pocket,
yeah, except for the one in her pocket.
which is
The
going to
rest
be trouble later.
No, not at all. Don't worry about it. It won't matter at all.
It'll be fine. She'll just plug it into a wall. It'll be our nightlight.
It'll be fine.
Butterflies
It'll be
around
fine.
it. It'll be fine.
It won't have tragic and unforeseen consequences, I promise. But a cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal except for the purposes of humor or dramatic irony. But what I love about this, the fact that Powder has to ditch the goods to avoid getting the crap kicked out of her, is it creates the tension within the crew, but even more so, it creates, you have Violet and Milo arguing over Powder's place in the crew, and
Right.
Powder overhears the worst part of it, right?
Yeah.
Powder overhears the part, and it's not a matter of, Violet isn't actually betraying her, but she does get a snippet, which sounds like Violet doesn't have any faith in her, and it builds up. And it's not an immediate break right then, but it contributes to the tension between the sisters. And I thought that was very well done and very disciplined not to overdo the emotional impact. Because that is so much of things. Like when you have a break, when you are done with somebody or you finally flip out on someone, it's usually not that one thing that caused it. It's the build of things.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really good writing too.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't know that about the sisters, and it kind of breaks my heart knowing that their relationship is gonna crumble because I love my sister. I don't want, and I have 2 daughters and they're very close as sisters. And I'm like,
stay alive. Everything will be fine. All you got to do is stay alive. He said so.
I don't want them to hate each other, but
this
whatever.
might be a little rough.
It's going to be a good story.
Might be a little rough. I think I've covered everything I had about the episode. I absolutely love this show. I can't wait to see your reactions to further episodes. Joelle, any last thoughts before we sign off?
When the kids were running away from the heist and they were still in Piltover, I love the bridge crossing. The bridge is opening and there's a giant ship coming through. We just had, from the Guardian's perspective, we just had a major terrorist event at an important location, but you can't stop that bridge opening anyway.
Right.
That is just so accurate. I just love that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a cool sequence, a cool scene, and it was again beautiful. They did that like pullback shot, and it's like there's the city with the bridge and the ship coming through. Yeah. Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
So much more effort than you get out of most properties these days. I really loved it. Really loved that. 100%. Kacey, any other last thoughts?
No, I liked it much better this time around. I don't know if it was because I was like paying attention, so I wasn't distracted with whatever else I was doing the first time. But the first time I tried to watch it, I got to about the scene where Vander is talking with the like pawn shop guy. And the 2 enforcers come in, and then I don't know, life happened. This time I was much more engaged with it, so that was cool. So thank you for that. For the
for people who do what we do as writers, like I feel like this show, like anybody who has put time into their craft to try to learn how to craft story, especially anyone's going to love the show. But if you're someone who's been working for years to try to become a better writer, the art that goes into this storytelling is gonna appeal to you. Like it's gonna get you if you give it a chance. So I'm glad you're liking it better this time around.
I am. And there's one more thing I wanted to note. Like I know that part of the reason that you wanted to get this particular group together is because we come from 3 different service academies, 3 different types of leadership positions within the 3 different branches of the U.S. military. You guys kind of talked about it a little bit, but the relationship between the 2 enforcers, and I didn't remember their names, but like I felt that in my soul, because there are so many times when I am that woman and I have some like super gung-ho, like all thrust, no vector, young pilot who just feels his wings and his like, yeah, man. And I'm like, hold on there. He's back there, killer. It's okay. Why don't you go take a walk? Let mama handle this. You know, like so yeah, I think I laughed because it was like, yeah, I feel you, lady. I do. So, but yeah, it was I thought that was very from the perspective of the military background, that felt very authentic.
Yeah, I've been a captain with lieutenants. Now, Captain Army is a much lower rank than Captain Navy, of course. I know you all know that, but as a mid-level manager, so to speak, yeah,
right.
You're approaching 30 or 40, and you have a 22-year-old who is so eager to do their duty and prove themselves that they are all intentions and no judgment. Yeah, I like all thrust, no vector. That's really awesome. Yeah.
Well, for perspective for your viewers, I'm a 23-year major, and I have about 3,000 flight hours, and most of the captains that I work around have maybe like the high time ones have about half that. So there's a lot of times when I'm sitting in there with guys in like young leadership positions, flight commanders and shop chiefs or whatever. And they're like, they're all fired up about something. And I'm like, hold on. You can fix this. You can even go to the boss and tell him he's fucking up. You have to do it a certain way. I'm sorry. I just swore like a lot. I apologize.
It's okay. I didn't really think we could keep it off the channel for very long, so I've given up on it. So be yourself.
Sorry. You can go tell the boss he's screwing up, but you have to do it. Like there's a way to do it. There's a way to do it and not get crucified. So sit your ass down and listen to what I'm about to tell you. Because
when I was a 23-year-old first lieutenant, I guess, my first sergeant, the senior NCO of the artillery battery I was in, used to constantly grab me by the back of the collar.
Yeah, hold on there, killer.
Sometimes, occasionally, literally, mostly metaphorically, when I would get incensed about something. In my opinion, still, most of the time I was right to be upset about what it was, but my reaction was the reaction of a 23-year-old man who is self-righteous about everything. So, I've been both the person holding the leash and the person whose leash is getting pulled on that one. I think that's a great observation, and those are both great, if not always likable, characters in the Enforcers. I think you're gonna enjoy their development as things go on. I will say that just about every character has multiple dimensions that you spend any time with, and it's a real joy to watch.
Yeah, that's great. That's what you want in your story, right? Like that's what I aspire to with everything I write. Yeah,
absolutely. Can't wait to keep watching this with you guys. Joelle, what do you have out now, and what are you working on next for your writing?
And what's coming soon?
I'll start with what's coming soon. I've got a novel, my first novel written by only me, coming out from Baen Books. It's called The Dabare Snake Launcher. It's about ancestor spirits, Mamiwata, and building 2 spaceports in Africa. It's near-term science fiction, and it'll be out in November. I'm currently working on the 4th novel with David Weber in the Multiverse series.
Small indie author David Weber. I'm sure most of you haven't heard of him.
He's only been on the New York Times bestseller list a few times, so you've probably heard of him. Our 3rd book in that series together is called The Road to Hell, and the next novel that we're working on is tentatively titled Band of Angels, but that might change because it lacks the word hell in it, and so it's not series consistent.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you don't want to break branding. Kacey, what do you have a lot out, but what do you have out recently, and what are you working on next?
So I recently completed my solo trilogy, The Psyche of War. It is a military-focused, military-focused alternate history about psychic women in wartime. I guess that's fairly military, right? War.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
Great series. I've read that one. I really like that. Joelle
Thank you.
series is great too. I'm sure I just haven't read it yet. So.
Yeah, thank you. So the third book in that came out in February. That book is called Skies to Conquer. It's set in Vietnam. There are Hueys, which is my aircraft. So you're welcome.
While you read or listen to it.
Yes. Your soundtrack should be "Gimme Shelter," "Fortunate Son,"
Run through the jungle.
"Run Through the Jungle." Yeah. You get the idea. Fun fact: that was my soundtrack when I wrote it. Like I told Amazon to play. In fact, I created a playlist on Amazon Music that's like Vietnam playlist, and it's got like all that stuff on there. Anyway, so that's the third book. The first book in the series, which is probably where you should start, is Minds of Men, and that one's set in World War II. So for that one, you're going to want to listen to like more big band type stuff. But yeah, so that's my completed trilogy, which is out now from Chris Kennedy Publishing. And right now I am working on another project. Well, actually, I'm working on two projects right now. The first one is
you're working on at least two that I know of.
Well, there's two that I'm actually doing work on. Let's put it that way. The main one is another project for Chris Kennedy. It's a brand new space opera property that I'm creating, and the working title for that one is The Queen's Fixer. And I have no idea when that one will be out because I'm going to write the first 3 books before we do any releasing. So stand by. In addition to that, I'm also working on the sequel to The Romanov Rescue, which I wrote with, over there, wherever he is, Justin Watson and Tom Kratman, which is another alternate history that postulates, what happens if not all of the Romanovs are actually killed by the Bolsheviks. So I'll let Justin tell you more about that one. So
yeah. So
Sorry, you're not ready for that segue?
Yeah, no, it's all right. The Romanov Rescue, you'll find links to that below because that's my most recent work that's out. And Tom, Kacey, and I, with some help from Mona Lisa Foster, wrote an alternate history that postulates what happens if some of the Romanovs survive and are rescued, and how the Russian Civil War and therefore the 20th century play out if you have a unifying figure for the White Russian faction, the White Russian being a political faction, not an ethnic faction, for those of you who may not be familiar. Yeah. Or an alcoholic faction. Very good. Which in this crowd is probably worth clarifying. So yeah, there'll be a link to that in the links below. You'll find links to Joelle and Kacey's work below, as well as their social media and websites. Ladies, send that to me. And if you enjoyed our content, please consider liking and subscribing. Leave comments telling us how brilliant you think our commentary is or how much bullshit you think our commentary is. We appreciate both. That's all for Lore and Valor. Hope to see you next time. And until then, keep up the fire.